Nisa Bulavinaka, to the Chair and the members of the subcommittee. Thank you very much for this opportunity provided to us to give you some input into the review of the Education Act. My name is Nalini Singh and I'm the Executive Director for the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. I have with me two colleagues, Shayal Nand, who is the team leader for our Gender and Transitional Justice program, and I have Patrina Tawake, who is the program officer for our Girls program. So the Fiji Women's Rights Movement welcomes the opportunity to contribute to the review of the Education Act 1966. As a feminist human rights organization with a long history of advocacy for gender equality, democracy, and social justice, FWRM strongly believes that education laws must evolve to respond to changing social realities and emerging risks faced by children and young people in Fiji. We welcome the opportunity to make this submission to Parliament on the Draft Education Bill 2025. The submission is in line with FWRM's work on advancing the rights and well-being of girls and young women. And I'd like to say at this point that we have been following this process from the very beginning, and we have made submissions before the drafting process began as well. And we have been advocating for these issues for a great many number of years, and nothing much has happened around it. So we welcome this opportunity to reiterate the 4 points that we have for you today. And the 4 points are, again, based on the work that we have been doing over the last 4 decades with girls and young women. The first issue is around mandatory comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE, or as we call it, family life education. The second issue is around water, sanitation, and hygiene, WASH issues in school. The third issue is inclusive education for girls with disabilities. And the final issue is safeguarding, including prevention of sexual exploitation and harassment, PSEAH, in short, and gender equality, disability, and social inclusion, GEDSI, in short, training for all. The priority area 1, mandatory comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE as we call it, in reference to the draft bill, it's in reference to Part 5, Division 1, Section 23. The bill provides authority over curriculum content. However, it does not require that CSE be included, examined, or delivered consistently across schools. The first point here is that, and this is relating also to some of the points that were made by the previous submission, Fiji is currently experiencing an increase in sexual behavior amongst young people, leading to unintended teenage pregnancies and HIV infections rising. The Multiple Indicator Cluster Survey of 2021 revealed that young people between the ages of 15 and 19 years old are engaging in sex with one or multiple partners with low contraceptive use. In 2024, Fiji recorded 1,583 new cases of HIV, a 13-fold increase in its usual 5-year average. Of those, 41% were aged 15 or younger, compared to 11 in 2023. So here we are saying that comprehensive sexuality education is a structured, age-appropriate curriculum that supports learners from primary to secondary school, and in early primary grades, CSE focuses on understanding one's body, personal boundaries, respect, consent, and recognizing and reporting abuse. Teaching children about safety and healthy relationships long before sexual activity becomes relevant. As students progress, the curriculum gradually introduces more complex topics, such as puberty, gender equality, gender-based violence, and respectful decision-making about relationships, ensuring the content matches children's cognitive and emotional development. This progression is recommended by the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, jointly developed by UNESCO, WHO, UNFPA, UNICEF, UN Women, and UNAIDS, which outlines essential topics and learning objectives across age groups. Evidence from global reviews and UN guidance confirms that high-quality, age-appropriate, comprehensive sexuality education does not increase early sexual activity or risky behavior. Instead, it is associated with delaying the onset of sex, increasing safer behaviors, and equipping young people with knowledge and skills to make informed decisions about their health and relationships. In Fiji, many young people are engaging in sexual activity without adequate knowledge of consent, contraception, or health risks. Girls are often placed in particularly vulnerable situations due to the silence around sexual health in families and schools. Boys also lack understanding of consent and respectful relationships. We therefore ask that making CSE mandatory ensures consistency, protects children from misinformation, and recognizes education as a key prevention tool for poor health outcomes, violence, and exploitation. So in Part 5, Division 1, we recommend that that section be amended to require the inclusion of mandatory age-appropriate comprehensive sexuality education from primary through to secondary levels aligned with internationally recognized guidance. Our second priority area, which is water, sanitation, and hygiene, WASH. And this is in reference to Part 8 in school regulations, because there's no other sections for us to refer this to. Division 1, health and safety, and Division 2 on inspections. So in the policy issues paper for the Education Act review, which informed the 2025 bill, stakeholders identified ensuring safe water and sanitation in schools as a key issue, calling for access to clean water sources, gender-segregated toilets, hand-washing stations, and waste disposal systems. However, there seems to be no mention of that in the current bill. There has also been an increase in the number of school dropouts over the past few years, as mentioned in the previous submission. Data shows that 45% of female students dropped out of school, both in primary and secondary, in 2025 alone. The UNICEF Pacific report published in 2016 highlighted that many girls in Fiji lacked access to private, clean, functional sanitation facilities in schools, leading to discomfort and absenteeism during their menstrual periods. And this is monthly. Access to safe and adequate wash facilities in schools is a gender equality issue. For many girls, poor sanitation, lack of privacy, and inadequate menstrual hygiene facilities directly affect school attendance, dignity, and learning outcomes. So we ask that the review must mandate minimum wash standards for all schools with a clear gender lens. Schools must provide safe, private, well-lit, functional sanitation facilities, including appropriate menstrual hygiene management. Ensure wash facilities are accessible, and that is essential to keeping girls in schools and supporting their participation. Our third priority area is on inclusive education for girls with disabilities. And this is in reference to Part 2, Section 7, Access and Right to Education, that guarantees access to education for every child. For girls with disabilities, access alone is insufficient. If learning environments, materials, and teaching methods are not accessible or supportive. In 2021, a total of 398 mainstream schools were identified that enroll children with disabilities. Girls accounted for 34% of schools with disabilities. The FWRM Girls Program highlights that girls with disabilities face that added layer of discrimination in those schools. Inclusive education must address the full spectrum of disabilities, including physical, sensory, neurological, psychological, and learning disabilities. While Fiji has students with disabilities enrolled in both special and mainstream schools, there is limited evidence of consistent monitoring or tailored support across the system. Inclusion requires more than physical infrastructure. It also means accessible learning materials, assistive technologies, trained teachers, counselors, and supportive systems such as buddy programs. Girls with disabilities face compounded discrimination and are at greater risk of exclusion if these supports are not put in place. So we ask that the bill should explicitly mandate inclusive education standards, regular audits and support services to ensure that girls with all types of disabilities can access, remain in, and succeed in education. The section should be strengthened to clarify that the right to education includes access to reasonable accommodation, support services, and inclusive learning environments. And this is coming directly from the work we do with disabled girls, specifically deaf girls. And finally, our fourth priority area is on including safeguarding, looking at PSEAH and GEDSI into the law. And this is in reference to Part 10, Student Behavior and Well-being, Section 74, Counseling for Students. From 2020 to 2024, Fiji recorded 7,283 crimes against children, with girls comprising 70% of as victim survivors. Adolescents aged 13 to 17 were disproportionately affected, representing almost 69% of all child crime victims. Safeguarding children in schools is a core responsibility of the education system. While codes of conduct exist, they are insufficient, without mandatory gender-responsive training on PSEAH. Children may face different and gendered risks of violence, abuse, and harassment. Without proper training, school staff may fail to recognize signs of abuse, respond appropriately, or understand how gender inequality increases vulnerability. We know there's a critical shortage of trained gender-sensitized counselors in school. Counseling responsibilities should not fall on our already burdened teachers. Each school should have access to trained counselors who can respond to gender-based violence, mental health challenges, and the needs of vulnerable students. So we are saying that the bill must mandate compulsory gender-responsive PSEAH training for all education sector employees, including trainee teachers, as a condition of employment. This must be complemented by mandatory GEDSI training to build inclusive, respectful, and safe learning environments. So in summary, our key recommendations are mandatory age-appropriate examined comprehensive sexuality education at all levels of schooling. Second is require proper training and guidance for teachers who are delivering that curriculum. Third is establish minimum gender-responsive WASH standards in all schools, and that should be monitored regularly as well. Fourth is mandatory inclusive education systems that support girls with all types of disabilities. Fifth is require compulsory gender-responsive PSEAH and GEDSI training for all education sector staff. And finally, we need to strengthen safeguarding systems and counseling support within all schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam, for your presentation and your submission with respect to the education bill. Honourable members, any questions or comments?
First of all, I'd like to thank you for your, obviously, your submissions are based on a lot of the data that you've collected and your direct interaction with the young girls and students that I've been involved with. One of the interesting things, I've noticed a lot of the 4 recommendations that you've made. Let me give an example. For instance, in terms of WASH, if we look at Section 63 of the Act, it says the school must comply with the prescribed health and safety requirements. So WASH is included under that. Is it then your submission that there needs to be a separate provision in the Act, or whether the specific details that you're talking about, the CSE and all of those other things, can come into the regs if they're hooked on to something that is already in the bill?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. Our recommendation is to add in, because without having a little bit of specificity in relation to menstrual hygiene needs, that it won't be complied with. Because the reality is that many schools around our country do not have the facilities. And a visit to some of the schools will show exactly that. Their doors are not in place. The taps don't work. The toilets are dirty, not cleaned regularly. There's no facility to dispose menstrual hygiene products. So there should be some mention of at least management of menstrual hygiene or wash facilities catering for girls in particular, because girls are particularly vulnerable almost on a monthly basis, from later in primary school to all of secondary school. And that is correlating directly with absenteeism. And the data is with the ministry. They know how many girls are missing school on a regular basis.
Just a question from me, the same as before. What are your views on compulsory education? Given that the Education Act 1966, the current one, it also has compulsory education, but it does not criminalize it. The current bill seeks to criminalize the compulsory education part. So just want to hear the views from the Fiji Women's Rights Movement. On the practical side of it. Thank you.
Well, firstly, I don't think it's in an aspect that requires criminalization of parents, because there are many factors that prevent, a parent from perhaps, following through with that responsibility. Many, and financial aspects is one part of it. I agree very much with the suggestion made around collecting disaggregated data. And disaggregated data not just on race and ethnicity, but also on the realities of what's happening in our communities, which is not homogeneous. We have great differences in the urban, peri-urban, rural, remote, as well as the maritime areas. So, the one solution is not going to fit that. We really do need to have more dialogue with communities to understand what the issues are that will lead to the prevention of a family in terms of sending the child to school. And one approach is not going to resolve anything in here. We really need to have targeted approaches if we would like to have a Fiji that has an educated population moving forward. Because the barriers are many, and we would like to focus and respond to those that we can have quick fixes to. Providing transport allowances is a quick fix, but how does that really resolve the issue of access to schools in the maritime areas? How does that resolve the issue in remote areas? It really doesn't. So we do require the type of disaggregated data on many parameters, as well as the dialogue that is quite easy to do because schools are across the terrains, and ministry could have that type of data and respond to it in a way that responds to everyone's needs, and not generic solutions. And to me, compulsory education or not, I think every parent recognizes that education is key for their children, and they do their best. But there are so many impediments in this day and age that need to be responded to, and we can only get that through dialogue and data.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your submissions, Madam.